It was one of those grey afternoons when the brownstone could have passed for a monastery, except the monk in charge was a genius with a temper and an appetite. Wolfe was upstairs in the plant rooms, communing with the orchids and ignoring civilization. Fritz was testing something that smelled like garlic in 4 dialects. I was in the office, finishing a letter to a client who thought expenses meant we worked for the joy of his smile. Then the buzzer sounded, the one for the front door. It cut through the calm like a razor nick on a fresh shave. I swiveled the chair, checked the clock, it wasn't yet 4, and hit the talk button. Nero Wolfe's office. A woman's voice came up, taut and hushed. My name is Inez Corday. Please, Mr. Goodwin, I need to see Mr. Wolfe. It's urgent. I've heard urgent from husbands missing cufflinks and wives missing husbands, but this one had a tremor that didn't sound rehearsed. You've got good timing, I told her. The orchids are safe for another hour, and I've got an open chair. I'd rather wait downstairs, she said quickly. Just tell him I'm here. He'll understand. Now that was new. Most strangers figured Wolfe was a doctor or a tax wizard until they met him. Someone who said he'd understand, had either read about us or had a problem that came with a file thick enough to deserve Wolfe's attention. I pressed the buzzer for the plant room. Yes, Archie, came the familiar rumble, slow and indulgent. Visitor, I said. Female, nervous, wants a word. Says you'll understand. A pause long enough for a whole orchid cycle, then I will come down. That was when I knew the routine had been derailed. Wolfe doesn't come down for visitors. They come up, and usually after a background check that would make the FBI blush. I straightened the office chairs, because if he was coming down before dinner, this was going to be something worth polishing the brass for. When the elevator door opened, he filled it. 300 pounds of intellect wrapped in a brown suit that could have frightened a banker. He didn't look at me. He went straight to the globe stand, poured himself a splash of beer and said, "Show her in." I went to the door, and there she was. A woman in her early 30s, neat hat, blue coat, gloves too light for the weather, eyes that hadn't slept. She hesitated on the threshold like she'd just walked into a courtroom. Mr. Wolfe, I said, this is Miss Inez Corday. Miss Corday, this is Nero Wolfe. He gave her a nod that could have been mistaken for a bow if you didn't know better. You said I would understand, he told her. Explain that. She took one step forward and stopped, as if the rug might bite. Because you've already seen the man who's going to kill me. That line hung in the air like the last note of a hymn. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Not alarm, but focus. He gestured toward the red chair opposite his desk. You had better sit, Miss Corday. I watched her cross the room, careful, like she was counting the steps. Whatever she carried in that purse was heavier than it looked, and whatever was coming, our quiet afternoon was gone for good. Wolfe didn't look up as she lowered herself into the red chair, only shifted the glass on his desk a precise inch to the left. That's how you knew he was interested. He started rearranging things instead of ignoring them. I closed the office door and took my seat near the bookshelves, because if a woman thought she was about to be killed, the least I could do was take notes while she explained it. Her gloves were white, or had been at some happier time. Now they showed grey shadows at the fingertips, the kind you get when you've been gripping something too long. You think this man means to kill you? Wolfe said, his voice soft as though he were measuring it. Why? I know he will, she said. He warned me. People issue warnings for effect, Wolfe said. Murderers act. That wasn't comfort, but it had the effect of straightening her spine. He said that if I told anyone what I saw, he'd finish what he started. I glanced at Wolfe. And what did you see? Her eyes moved to me, then away, like a shy dancer who'd lost her step. A man died last night. They're calling it a suicide. But it wasn't. Name? Wolfe asked. Charles Ryman. He was an accountant at the Ridley Agency. Insurance claims, investments, that sort of thing. She took a deep breath. He worked with me. That was a piece of symmetry you didn't need to draw. The kind of office where half the staff hates the other half and one of them keeps a bottle in the bottom drawer. Wolfe's fingers tapped once on the armrest. Your relation to him? I was his secretary, she said, and there was a tremor on the word was. He stayed late to meet a client. I'd finished the filing and went back to get my umbrella. I heard voices, angry ones. Then a sound, something heavy striking the floor. Her hands were gripping each other now. When I opened the door, Charles was on the floor by his desk. A man was standing over him. He turned. I saw his face. Describe him. Wolfe's eyes were half closed, the way they get when he's pulling a net tight in his head. I can't. That's what's strange. I know I saw him, but I can't hold the image. Like remembering a dream. You know it was real, but the features... I leaned forward. You're saying you can't describe him at all? Not height, color, anything? Dark suit, gloves. His voice was calm. He said, You didn't see this, and walked out. I froze. Then when I looked down, the gun was on the carpet near Charles. They said he shot himself, but you saw him alive when the shot was fired. Wolfe finished. She nodded once. I didn't tell the police. I couldn't. He called me an hour later. I don't know how he knew where I live. He said if I told anyone, I'd be next. Then he hung up. Wolfe inhaled deeply through his nose, which meant the air in the room was about to get heavier with thought. You came to me this afternoon. Why not this morning? Because I thought I could forget, she said, her voice breaking on it. But someone left a note at my apartment door. It said, You've already told someone. I let out a low whistle. That's a talent. Our killer's got ESP. She didn't smile. Wolfe frowned at me. A small one, the kind that could slice granite. Archie. The note. She fished a folded envelope from her purse and handed it across. Wolfe didn't touch it. He gestured for me to take it, which I did, using a corner of my handkerchief because he hates smudges on his evidence. The envelope was plain cream. No stamp, no return. The note inside was typed, neatly, deliberate spacing, mechanical, not amateur. Just 6 words. You've already told someone. Now it begins. Wolfe's gaze stayed on her. You brought this directly from your apartment. Yes. I came here straight after finding it. You live alone? Yes. Who has keys to your building? She hesitated. The superintendent, the mail clerk. I suppose anyone who... Archie. Wolfe's tone changed, and that was my cue. Got it, I said. You want Saul. Precisely. And one of the others, if available. Miss Corday cannot return to her apartment this evening. She will be safer under surveillance. Her eyes widened. You think he'll come back? I think, Wolfe said, that if he believes you have confided in someone, he will attempt to ascertain who and how much you know. Such curiosity is often fatal. I moved to the phone and called Saul Panza, who can find a lost cat in Times Square during a blackout. He was in, naturally. I told him to come with a car, discreet, and to bring the equipment for an overnight watch. He said 2 words, on it, and hung up. When I turned back, Wolfe had closed his eyes, hands steepled. That was his thinking posture. You could have fried an egg in the silence in that office. Miss Corday was sitting stiffly, looking at him as though waiting for a sentence to be passed. I broke the pause. You mentioned the Ridley agency. You think anyone there might have known about Ryman's meeting last night? She nodded quickly. Yes, his partner, Mr. Cale Ridley. But he's on a trip to Chicago. The others, maybe one of the adjusters, Mr. Dunn. He handles the big claims. Any recent claim under review? Wolfe asked, still without opening his eyes. Yes. A life insurance payout. $200,000 to a widow named Mrs. Vale. There were discrepancies. Charles said something wasn't adding up. That opened a door in my head wide enough for suspicion to stroll through. So if Ryman was going to expose something wrong in that claim, maybe someone decided he'd be better silent. Wolfe's eyes opened. An inference, not a conclusion. We require evidence, not editorial. He turned to Miss Corday. You will write in your own hand a statement of everything you have told me. Archie will type a duplicate. You will sign both. One remains with me. One will be given to Inspector Kramer if circumstances necessitate. She flinched. The police? If I judge that your peril outweighs your reluctance, yes. My first duty is to preserve my client's life, not her comfort. That shut her up, which in this room was an achievement. I set the typewriter rolling while she wrote, her pen scratching like a nervous cricket. When both documents were done, Wolfe signed as witness and sealed them. You will remain here until Mr. Panzer arrives. Archie, prepare the front room. She may rest there until dusk. I showed her out, and as she passed, the faint smell of lilac followed her, a perfume that doesn't belong in fear. She thanked me in a whisper. When I came back, Wolfe was staring at the note again. He hadn't moved an inch, except the eyes. They were drilling through the paper like it owed him rent. You think it's a bluff? I asked. He looked up slowly. No, it is a provocation. Our adversary wishes to observe our reaction. Therefore, we shall provide him one. Meaning? He leaned back. We will let it be known that Miss Corday confided in me. That should hasten his next step. I grinned. Always the gracious host. He ignored that. Archie, I will require from Mr. Panzer a full account of anyone approaching the vicinity of Miss Corday's building tonight. Also, a copy of Ryman's obituary, any police summary of his death, and a list of Ridley Agency's principal accounts. You think this ties to the insurance business? I think, Wolfe said, pouring himself another measure of beer, that when a man who handles other people's money dies suddenly, the reason is seldom romance. The buzzer rang. The front door again. I moved, but Wolfe's voice stopped me. No need. Mr. Panzer is punctual. He wasn't wrong. 10 seconds later, Saul came in, hat tilted, face blank as ever. He gave Wolfe a short nod. Car's ready. Want me to keep eyes on her place from the street or the hallway? From within, Wolfe said. She will show you her rooms. If anyone attempts entry, you will summon me first. Police second. Understood. Saul turned to me. You got a key? She has it. They left together, quiet as fog. The brownstone settled back into its version of calm, which is what you get when a bomb's fuse is already burning, but nobody's looking yet. Wolfe turned his chair toward the globe again and said, Archie, fetch me the Ridley Agency directory from the cabinet. We will begin with Mr. Dunn. I crossed to the eye in a cabinet, pulled the Ridley Agency directory, and set it in front of Wolfe. The volume landed with a solid thump that drew a faint grunt of approval from him. He leaned forward just enough to open it, a movement that, for Wolfe, counted as vigorous. I stood by, waiting to see where he'd dig. He traced a thick finger down the columns until it stopped. Dunn, Oliver J., he read aloud. Senior Claims Adjuster, 22 years with the firm. He looked at me. There will be a telephone number. Call him. I flipped the page, found the number, and reached for the receiver. Wolfe didn't like making calls himself unless the other party owed him money, or an apology. The line clicked, and a crisp male voice said, Ridley Agency, Dunn speaking. Good afternoon, Mr. Dunn, I said. Archie Goodwin here, assistant to Nero Wolfe. Silence for a beat, then. The detective? Unless there's another Nero Wolfe in the phone book. We're looking into the death of your colleague Charles Ryman. Another pause, longer this time. The police ruled that a suicide. Sure, I said, and I once saw a pig fly over Madison Avenue. We'd like to ask you a few questions in person. Your office or ours? I don't see why my office should be involved in... That's all right, I cut in. Our place it is. I'll expect you within the hour. I hung up before he could object. Wolfe's eyebrow went up a degree. You presume much? Habit, I said. But if he's innocent, he'll come to clear the air. If he's not, curiosity will drag him in anyway. Wolfe's lips twitched, halfway between irritation and appreciation. Indeed. Meanwhile, call Saul. I wish to confirm Miss Corday's arrival. I rang Saul's private number. He answered on the first buzz. She's inside, he said. Lights off, curtains drawn. I've got the hallway view through the peephole. No sign of anyone sniffing around. Keep her steady, I said. Wolfe thinks our ghost might rattle the door. He's welcome to try, Saul replied, and the line went dead. I replaced the receiver, turned, and found Wolfe watching me the way a chess master watches a pawn that might accidentally win the game. Satisfied? For now, I said. He leaned back, laced his fingers, and stared into space. That's when you know the brain's running faster than the room's oxygen supply. The office went quiet except for Fritz's faint noises in the kitchen. Spoon, pot, fire. The smell of onions and butter crept in, mixing with the tang of Wolfe's beer. I was thinking that murder at an insurance agency wasn't the worst way to spend a Thursday when the door buzzer sang again. I got up and hit the talk button. Goodwin here. Done, said the voice, tight but controlled. I'm at your door. Come on up, I said, pressing the release. Wolfe's chair creaked as he turned to face the entrance. He doesn't do it often, so when he does, you know he's expecting substance. I opened the office door just as the elevator stopped. Out stepped a square-shouldered man in a dark suit that had seen too many commutes. Late 40s, thinning hair, clean-shaven. The face was pale, like it lived under fluorescent lights. He took in the room with one fast sweep and met Wolfe's eyes. Mr. Wolfe, he said, nodding, I didn't expect... Well, this is unexpected. You came, Wolfe said simply. Therefore, you expected something. Dunn managed a faint smile. Fair point. I showed him to the red chair opposite Wolfe's desk, the same one Miss Corday had used not an hour earlier. He noticed the indent in the cushion, and his eyes flickered. Just once. But I caught it. Wolfe poured himself another beer, the kind of casual act that always made men nervous. You were acquainted with Mr. Ryman. For over 10 years. He was meticulous. Maybe too much so. He took the work seriously. Enough to die for it? I asked. Dunn's head snapped toward me. I told the police. It doesn't make sense. He wasn't the type. But the gun was there, his prints on it. What else could they think? Wolfe's voice came slow. You were aware of any irregularities in your firm's current cases? Dunn blinked. Irregularities. Discrepancies. Unusual claims. Clients dissatisfied with settlements. He shifted in the chair. Every business has complaints. Indeed, Wolfe murmured. Yet not every business produces corpses. Dunn's hand went to his tie. Look, if this is about that Vale policy... Ah, Wolfe said softly. Mrs. Vale. A widow. Dunn hesitated. Yes. Her husband died 2 months ago. Accident on a yacht near Montauk. Large policy. Charles was reviewing it before the payout. Routine procedure. And he found it troublesome? I wouldn't say that. Then what would you say? Wolfe asked, his tone silk with an edge of steel. Dunn swallowed. He mentioned something odd. A missing witness statement, maybe a discrepancy in the signatures. I told him to drop it. The company had already approved the claim. And he ignored your counsel. Dunn gave a tight nod. Was Mrs. Vale informed of his doubts? I don't know, Dunn said. She came to the office twice. Once before the payment, once after the funeral. Polite woman, very composed. Charles handled both meetings. I wasn't present. Describe her. He frowned. Tall, blonde, early 40s. Dresses like money without trying. The kind who always looks like she knows the answer before you ask the question. I whistled softly. That type usually does. Wolfe turned his gaze to me. Archie, make an appointment with Mrs. Vale. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Her address will be in the file Saul retrieves tonight. Dunn started. Wait, you're investigating this. I am. Now, Wolfe said. You think she... I think nothing, Wolfe interrupted. But if Ryman's death served to expedite a payment of $200,000, then every beneficiary merits my attention. Dunn stood. I don't want my firm's name dragged. Sit down, Wolfe said, so quietly it carried the weight of thunder. Dunn obeyed without a word. Your firm's name is already in the newspapers. You will assist us or face the alternative, the attention of Inspector Kramer. Choose. That broke the rest of Dunn's resistance. All right, he muttered. I'll cooperate. But be discreet. Ridley's reputation is as secure as your conscience, Wolfe said. That will be all for now. I escorted Dunn out. In the elevator mirror, his reflection looked like a man who just realized he'd stepped into a game with pieces he didn't understand. When I returned, Wolfe was still staring at the empty chair. He's nervous, I said. Of course. He has secrets. Whether they are criminal or merely human remains to be seen. The phone rang again. I picked it up. Saul's voice. Archie. Got something. A man's been loitering across the street from Corday's building. Grey fedora, dark coat. Didn't move for 20 minutes, then disappeared into the alley. I'm checking it now. Stay sharp, I told him. Always do, Saul said, and clicked off. Wolfe had heard. He always did. A watcher, he murmured. Predictable. He will return. Want me to join Saul? No, he's adequate. You will prepare notes of our interview with Mr. Dunn, then contact Inspector Kramer. Inform him I wish to discuss Ryman's death at 9 this evening. That raised my brows. Inviting Kramer this early? You usually wait until you've got him cornered. Tonight, Wolfe said. The corner may move. I went to the desk and began typing. Wolfe poured himself another glass, the quiet sound of liquid filling the space between our thoughts. Outside, the light had gone from gray to the dark blue that means Manhattan's thinking about dinner. Inside, Wolfe was already tasting the next move, and somewhere across town, a man in a fedora had just learned that the safest threat is one never delivered twice. The typewriter carriage hit the end of the line with that neat, metallic ding that tells you you've been sitting too long. I tore the sheet free and slid it across the desk. Wolfe's eyes passed over it once, and that was enough. He doesn't read twice unless he plans to quote you in court. Acceptable, he said. File it under Ryman, Charles. Subcategory, Ridley Agency. Filed, I said, tucking it into the drawer. You want the good glass for Kramer, or do I set out the usual one he complains about? The usual, Wolfe said. Its imperfection suits his disposition. The buzzer sounded just then, one short ring from the vestibule. I checked the clock, 8:50. The man had an internal compass that could shame Greenwich. I opened the door before he knocked, and Inspector Kramer came in wearing a raincoat that looked like it had just fought a losing battle with the weather, and won on points. His cigar was unlit, which meant he was still pretending Wolfe's rules mattered. Evening, Inspector, I said. You're just in time for the interrogation of the day. We've had accountants, secretaries, and insurance men. Your favorite species? Save the chatter, Goodwin, he growled. Wolfe asked for me. That usually means he's either found something or wants to annoy me. Why not both? I said, but he was already heading into the office. Wolfe greeted him with a nod. No handshakes. Never. Sit, Mr. Kramer. There is a death you have misinterpreted. Kramer grunted, lowering himself into the red chair. If you're talking about Charles Ryman, we called it clean. Suicide. Everything fits. Everything, Wolfe said. Accept the truth. That earned me a quick side look from Kramer, the kind that says how long's he been rehearsing that line. Start talking, Kramer said. Wolfe didn't start. He unfolded. A woman, Inez Corday, was in Ryman's employ. She was present, unseen, when a man shot Ryman and left the weapon. She did not inform you because the killer warned her. This afternoon she received a note implying surveillance and retribution. She is now under protection. Kramer sat up straight, the cigar forgotten in his fingers. You hiding a witness again, Wolfe? That's obstruction. No, preservation. Your bureau fails too frequently at that art. Kramer's eyes narrowed. Where is she? She is in a safe location, guarded by Saul Panzer. If you insist, I will deliver her to your office tomorrow after I have spoken with Mrs. Vale, the beneficiary of a substantial claim Ryman was investigating. Kramer's lips pressed into a line thick enough to choke him. So we've got another woman in this now. What's your angle, Wolfe? Human motive, Wolfe said. You chase evidence, I pursue reason. They meet rarely, but tonight they may intersect. Kramer muttered something unprintable and shoved his hat back. You've got nothing but a scared girl and your own hunches. If I find out you're sitting on material evidence, you will bluster, Wolfe said calmly. You may also observe something useful. He lifted the note Miss Corday had left with us and passed it across. The typewriting is even, deliberate. Each letter aligned. A machine of quality, maintained. There are 2 defects, slight clogging on the lowercase e and r. The spacing suggests a Remington noiseless Model 7. I expect you will confirm that few such machines exist outside professional offices. Kramer studied the note, scowling. Could have been written anywhere. But not by anyone, Wolfe said. A man who threatens so precisely chooses his tools with care. I would wager this one enjoys order, perhaps too much. Meaning? Meaning our killer is systematic. He arranges facts the way other men arrange flowers, and when something disrupts his design, he removes it. Kramer snorted. You sound like a psychiatrist. I sound, Wolfe replied, like a man observing your suspect's mind instead of his fingerprints. I could tell the inspector was about to blow his gasket, so I slid a chair between them for safety. Maybe we should let him finish, Inspector. He's warming up. Kramer glared at me but leaned back. Fine. Keep talking. The Ridley Agency, Wolfe continued, is large enough to conceal corruption, small enough for loyalty to obscure it. Ryman discovered a fraud in the Vale claim. He confronted someone. He was silenced. Miss Corday saw the act and was threatened. Today, our adversary seeks to learn whether she has spoken. That suggests he is unsure, an error. Intelligent murderers do not permit uncertainty. Unless they're amateurs, I said. Exactly. Wolfe looked pleased. An amateur compelled by necessity rather than profit. Such people make mistakes quickly. Kramer stubbed out his unlit cigar in the ashtray. And you think this Mrs. Vale is mixed up in it? I think she is involved in the event whether she knows it or not, Wolfe said. Archie will visit her in the morning. Kramer turned to me. You'll visit nobody until I verify this witness exists. I can describe her perfume, I said. Lilac, not fake. Want me to testify under oath? He growled something that might have been my name in Morse code. Wolfe's voice cut through. You may, of course, detain me or my assistant, though that would waste your evening and your department's goodwill. Or you may permit us to continue and claim credit afterward. That got him. He sighed, long and hard. Fine. But if this goes south, I'm sending men to your doorstep. I shall alert Fritz to prepare sandwiches, Wolfe said. Kramer stood, pocketed the note, and paused at the door. If your girl vanishes, it's on you. She won't vanish, Wolfe said. Someone else will. When he left, the silence filled in behind him like a door closing underwater. Wolfe leaned back, eyes shut. Archie. Yeah. You will go to Miss Corday's apartment at dawn, relieve Mr. Panzer, Collect whatever he has learned and escort Miss Corday here before you call upon Mrs. Vale." "Sure," I said. "Want me to take a bouquet for the killer?" He didn't answer, which meant I could go. I locked the office, switched off the light, and headed upstairs to my room. The brownstone doesn't sleep. It hibernates. The radiator hissed like a whisper, and the city outside muttered back. I lay awake longer than I meant to, listening to the rhythm of the rain against the windows. Somewhere across town, Saul was watching a dark hallway, and a woman who'd said she was going to die was trying not to. Around 5 the next morning, I was dressed, shaved, and downstairs before the kitchen smelled like Fritz's first batch of rolls. Wolfe was already at his desk. No orchids, no breakfast, just the phone in his hand. He hung up as I came in. "You're prompt," he said. I try to impress. "Mr. Panzer reports no intrusions," he said, but he found fresh footprints in the hallway outside Miss Corday's door, wet, size 9, male, pointed heel. The superintendent claims ignorance. That will not last. I grabbed my hat. "I'll take it from here." "Do so with care," Wolfe said. "I detest rescuing corpses." That was as affectionate as he gets. I left the brownstone, took the Packard, and drove through streets still slick with dawn. The city looked half-finished, like someone had forgotten to color it in. When I reached Miss Corday's building, Saul was leaning against the wall inside the lobby, looking as fresh as an owl after a long night. "She's fine," he said quietly. "Didn't sleep. Heard footsteps around too. I checked. Hall empty except for those prints." "See anyone come or go?" "One man about 3 o'clock. Dark coat, brimmed hat. Went up to the second floor, stayed 2 minutes, came down without knocking on any doors." "Tail him?" "Tried, but he slipped out the side alley into a cab." "No plate?" I frowned. "All right, I'll take her to Wolfe. You grab a few hours." Saul nodded and disappeared down the stairwell, noiseless as a rumor. I knocked gently. The door opened almost at once. Miss Corday was dressed, coat buttoned, gloves on, eyes red but steady. "Is it safe?" "Safe enough for an escort," I said. "Come on." As we stepped into the hallway, she stopped suddenly. Her eyes were fixed on the floor near the doorframe. A single sheet of paper lay there, folded once. She bent and picked it up, hand trembling. I saw the same clean typewritten lines, and I didn't need to read them to know who sent it. Her voice barely made sound. "It says, 'You spoke again.'" She stared at the words as if they'd been written in her own blood, and for a second, I thought she might drop right there in the hallway. I took the paper from her fingers and folded it once more, keeping my grip steady so she'd see that at least one of us had pulse control. "It's all right," I said. "He's bluffing." Her voice came out flat. "He knew. How could he know I was leaving?" "Maybe he's got a spy in the walls," I said, guiding her toward the elevator. "Or maybe he likes theatrics. Either way, he's behind schedule. He should have sent roses." That got me a thin look that wasn't quite a smile, which was all I needed to know she hadn't turned to stone yet. The elevator creaked its way down, stopping like it was thinking twice before obeying gravity. We stepped out, onto the street. The morning was fogged just enough to smear the city's edges. Good cover if you were following someone, better if you weren't being followed at all. I scanned the sidewalks, the parked cars, the windows above. Nothing moved except a milk truck 2 blocks down and a guy sweeping yesterday into the gutter. Still, my gut said we weren't alone. "Keep your head down," I told her as we crossed to the Packard. "And if I tell you to duck, you don't argue philosophy. You just fold." "I understand," she whispered. "Good. Wolfe wouldn't like me showing up without you intact. He hates inefficiency." She let out a breath that might have been a laugh if her nerves hadn't burned it halfway. I got her into the front seat, shut the door, and circled around. As I slid behind the wheel, I caught a shape in the side mirror. A man pausing at the corner, half turned toward us, fedora pulled low. When the engine started, he shifted out of sight like a card disappearing into a sleeve. I didn't mention it. Fire works better quiet. We made it to West 35th without traffic, which was the only miracle Manhattan handed out before noon. I parked at the curb, got her inside, and bolted the door behind us. Fritz poked his head out from the kitchen, his eyebrows doing a double-take at the sight of a woman before breakfast. "She'll have coffee," I told him. "Make it strong enough to make a confession." He nodded and vanished, already offended by the intrusion into his routine. Wolfe was in his chair, of course. He hadn't moved since I'd left, except maybe to breathe. When he saw us, he inclined his head just enough to acknowledge gravity. "Miss Corday, you're unharmed." "Physically," she said. "Excellent. Emotional stability may follow." "Sit." She obeyed, folding her gloved hands in her lap. I handed him the note. He didn't touch it immediately. He studied me first. "Where was it?" "Folded on the floor outside her apartment door. Same typeface, same alignment. Saul saw footprints earlier. Size 9, pointed heel. My bet's the author made a return visit." He nodded once. "Archie, the magnifier." I fetched it from the drawer. Wolfe spread the note beneath the glass, studying every loop and gap as if it might confess under pressure. After a minute, he murmured, "The spacing has shifted slightly. The E-defect is worsened. The machine has been used recently, perhaps hurriedly, a sign of agitation." "So our man's nervous," I said. "Maybe he's realized he's running out of stationery." "Or he is escalating," Wolfe said, looking up at Miss Corday. "When threats become repetition, action follows. Did anyone know of your visit here yesterday?" She shook her head. "No one. I didn't speak to anyone but you and Mr. Panzer." He turned to me. "Then we must assume observation, either visual or auditory." "Meaning he's been watching her apartment or us?" "Precisely." Wolfe rang the buzzer to the kitchen. Fritz appeared with the coffee tray like a summoned priest. Wolfe waved him off before he could pour. "Archie, telephone Mr. Panzer. He will check the adjoining apartments, roofs, and alleys. Anyone with a line of sight to Miss Corday's door is of interest." I called Saul. He picked up with the same calm he'd have used to order toast. "I'm already checking," he said before I could speak. "Guy on the second floor directly opposite her window has binoculars on the sill. Claims he's a bird watcher. His landlady says he's allergic to feathers." "Good," I said. "Wolfe wants the full report soon as you've got it." He hung up without a goodbye, which is his way of being polite. When I turned back, Wolfe was watching Miss Corday with that patient, heavy gaze that made people talk, whether they meant to or not. "Miss Corday," he said, "did Mr. Ryman mention any specific document or figure connected to the Vale claim?" She hesitated, then nodded. "There was a file. He called it the offset. He said it proved something, but he didn't explain. He kept it locked in his drawer." "Describe it." "A blue folder with the Ridley Agency logo. I saw it on his desk the night he died." "And afterward?" She shook her head. "When the police searched, it was gone." Wolfe drummed his fingers. "Then our killer not only silenced a witness, but retrieved a single missing piece. That file will contain his undoing." "You think he still has it?" I asked. "Of course. A thief rarely discards the proof of his success. He will conceal it, but not destroy it." He turned back to her. "Miss Corday, would anyone besides Ryman have had access to that drawer?" "Only Mr. Dunn," she said softly. "He kept the duplicate keys." I looked at Wolfe. "Our friend Dunn again." "Yes," Wolfe murmured. "And if he lied yesterday about the extent of his involvement, we shall know soon." Miss Corday's coffee sat untouched. She was staring at the window, pupils small, shoulders taut. Wolfe noticed. "You are not safe here indefinitely," he said. "Your presence in this house will become known. Archie will take you to a hotel under another name until we conclude this matter." She looked startled. "But you said—" "I said you would be safe under surveillance," Wolfe interrupted. "That condition no longer applies. Our adversary's reach has expanded, he anticipates. Therefore, we must alter the pattern." I took that as a cue to start thinking of where to stash her. Somewhere neutral, no connections, easy exits. "The Lamont on 44th?" I suggested. "Quiet staff, rooms with 2 doors. "Acceptable," Wolfe said. "Register her as Mrs. Smith. Pay in cash." I nodded, grabbed my coat, and helped her stand. She was steady now, but the tension was humming under her skin like a wire about to snap. Before we reached the door, Wolfe spoke again. "Archie." I turned. "When you return, visit Mr. Dunn's office at the Ridley Agency. Take note of his typewriter. If it is a Remington Noiseless Model 7, photograph the E and R." I gave him a salute. "You want me to bring the ribbon too?" "If you can obtain it without theft, yes. If not, record enough for comparison. The law frowns upon larceny, even in pursuit of justice." "I'll try not to smudge civilization," I said. Miss Corday and I went down to the street again. The air had cleared a little, leaving that crisp edge that makes New York look newly invented. I got her a cab from the corner stand, gave the driver directions, and slipped him a bill fat enough to ensure silence. She climbed in, turning her face toward the window, and for a second I caught her reflection, pale, drawn, but still hanging on. I watched the cab pull away, then headed uptown toward the Ridley building. The city was waking up now, horns, voices, the daily scramble. But my mind stayed on that note folded in my pocket. "You spoke again." Whoever wrote it was losing patience. That was good. People who lose patience make mistakes. The Ridley Agency occupied the 6th floor of a stone-faced box near Bryant Park. I showed the receptionist my grin, which usually works faster than credentials, and told her I had to drop off some papers for Mr. Dunn. She waved me through like I'd brought roses. Dunn's office was at the back. Door half open, light on, no secretary in sight. I stepped in quietly. The desk was neat, too neat, and there it was. A Remington Noiseless Model 7, polished enough to blind you. I crouched beside it, pulled the magnifier from my pocket, and took a good look at the type bars. The E and R were worn just enough to match Wolfe's description. I started for my camera, but then a shadow moved on the glass behind me. Fast, silent, deliberate. I spun, hand halfway to my coat pocket, and froze. Oliver Dunn was standing in the doorway, holding a pistol leveled square at my chest. He didn't say a word at first, just stood there with the gun as steady as a judge's verdict. His face had the blank calm of a man who's rehearsed this moment in his head and is still deciding whether to go through with it. The office light hit the metal just right. A Remington may be noiseless, but a .38 never is. "Nice morning for paperwork," I said, keeping my hands where he could see them, though I don't usually file bullets. "Step away from the desk," Dunn said. His voice was lower than I remembered, tighter. "And keep your hands up." I obeyed halfway, shifting a few inches sideways so I wasn't backlit against the window. If this is your idea of a staff meeting, your morale's going to suffer. "Don't play games, Goodwin. You shouldn't be here." "That's funny," I said. "Ryman probably thought the same thing about whoever came into his office with a gun. Difference is, he didn't get a second act." His jaw flexed. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Sure I do. You've got the same model typewriter that's been sending love notes to Miss Corday. Wolfe figured it without breaking a sweat. You, on the other hand, look like a man trying to sweat without being noticed." The barrel wavered. Not much, but enough to tell me he wasn't a professional. I took another half step, casual, like shifting my weight. "I said stay where you are," he snapped. "Relax," I told him. "You don't want to do this in your own office. Bloodstains are hell on the carpet, and Wolfe will still solve it before the cleaning crew arrives. His eyes twitched, and there it was. That thin crack between fear and anger that always lets the light through. He was scared, and scared men talk. "Why'd you send the notes, Dunn?" I asked. "Trying to scare her quiet? Or just reminding yourself you'd done it?" He swallowed, lips dry. "I didn't kill Ryman." That's a popular opinion lately. Unfortunately, the evidence keeps disagreeing. I swear, he was already dead when I found him. His voice faltered. "I just took the file." "Bingo. I didn't move. You don't wave the flag before the horse crosses the line." "The offset file?" He blinked, surprised, I knew. "Yes." "Why?" His eyes darted toward the desk drawer, then back. "Because it was my fault. The claim, Mrs. Vale's. He'd found the discrepancy. It was my signature on the approval. He wanted to report it to the board. If he had, I'd have been ruined. I came in after the shot. The drawer was open. I panicked. "And the note to Miss Corday?" He winced. "That wasn't me. I only wanted the file back before anyone saw it. The note, she must have imagined it." "Sure," I said. "People always imagine things typed on a Remington with matching defects." He stiffened, realizing too late what he'd handed me. I saw the shift before the movement, the gun rising again, his left hand tightening on the grip. He wasn't thinking now. He was drowning. "Easy," I said quietly. "You start shooting, you'll have to explain 2 corpses in one firm, and believe me, the press eats that up." He licked his lips, eyes darting toward the hallway. "You're leaving. You never saw me here." "I could," I said, "but my boss gets cranky when I skip reporting armed confessions." "Goodwin, don't make me—" He never finished. A sound came from the corridor, a sharp, clean rap on the office door. Dunn flinched, swung the gun toward the noise, and that was all the invitation I needed. I lunged forward, caught his wrist, and twisted. The gun went off with a deafening crack, punching a hole through the Ridley calendar. His fingers loosened. I brought my knee up, sent the weapon clattering across the floor, and shoved him into his own chair. "Next time you want privacy," I said, "lock the door." The door swung open, and a tall man in a dark coat stepped in. Brown hair, gray eyes, face lean and watchful. He looked at the gun on the floor, then at me, then at Dunn. "Am I interrupting?" "Depends," I said, breathing steady again. "Who are you?" He reached into his coat slowly, flipped a leather wallet open. Inside was a gold badge. "Detective Sergeant Pollard, homicide." That took a turn I didn't expect. "You always arrive in the nick of time, or is that just the Tuesday special?" He smiled faintly. "We received a call from a Mr. Wolfe, said his assistant might need company." I almost laughed. Wolfe's timing was Swiss, perfect and a little annoying. Pollard gestured to the gun. "Mind if I—" "Be my guest," I said, stepping back. He picked it up with a handkerchief and checked the chamber. "1 round fired. You 2 want to tell me who pulled the trigger?" "I did," I said, "but only into your calendar." He gave the hole a look and turned to Dunn. "And you were planning to do what with that?" Dunn's voice was barely a murmur. He startled me. I thought— "You thought wrong," I cut in. Pollard motioned to the corner. "Sit tight, both of you." He made a quick call from the desk phone, short and businesslike, then returned to me. "Mr. Wolfe says you've got something about the Ryman case. That right?" "He's generous," I said. "I've got Dunn's confession about stealing a file from a murder scene. That's a start." Pollard's eyebrows went up. "Confession, huh? I'd like that on record." "Fine," I said, "but Wolfe will want him alive when you're done. He hates interruptions during lunch." Pollard took Dunn by the arm. The man didn't resist. He was deflated, all the air gone out. As they passed, I caught his eye. There was guilt there, yes, but also something else. Fear, not of us, but of someone still waiting in the wings. "Tell Wolfe," Dunn muttered, voice cracking. "I wasn't the only one." Ridley, he knew. Ask Mrs. Vale. Ask her what she paid for. Then Pollard led him out. I stood in the wrecked office, breathing in the smell of cordite and dust, and looked down at the typewriter gleaming on the desk. The keys still had faint oil on them. Wolfe would want samples, so I rolled a sheet in, tapped a few letters, and pocketed the page. Then I left, locking the door behind me with the key still dangling from the inside knob. One of those details that drives detectives mad. Back in the Packard, I dialed Wolfe from a payphone near the curb. "You're clairvoyant," I said when he answered. "Explain," he said. "Your hunch about Dunn was right. He pulled a gun, confessed to taking Ryman's file, then folded when your pet sergeant walked in." "Ah," Wolfe said. "Sergeant Pollard performed competently?" "He saved me the trouble of breaking Dunn's arm. The man mentioned Ridley before, leaving, and hinted Mrs. Vale bought herself more than insurance. That," Wolfe murmured, "was inevitable. Return at once. You want the type sample first? Bring it. And Archie, eat nothing on the way. Fritz is preparing veal à la mode. I dislike interruptions." That was Wolfe. A murder confession, a missing file, and a fresh lunch schedule in one breath. As I hung up, I caught sight of the same man in the grey fedora standing across the street again. Same build, same posture, pretending to read a newspaper upside down. When he saw me watching, he folded it neatly and walked toward the corner. I didn't follow. Not yet. Wolfe would say patience is the economy of motion. But as I slid behind the wheel and started the engine, I knew the next move would come fast, and this time the gun might not miss the calendar. Traffic on 35th was doing its usual imitation of a nervous breakdown, so I swung the Packard into a side street and coasted toward the brownstone. The grey fedora man hadn't followed directly, but I'd caught glimpses, reflection in a shop window, silhouette near a newsstand. He wasn't careless, just confident, which usually means trained or desperate. I decided to let him trail. Wolfe liked his quarry delivered warm. The brownstone's iron gate clicked shut behind me, and the street noise dropped away like a curtain falling. Fritz met me at the door, immaculate as always, holding a folded towel like he planned to disinfect the air. "Mr. Wolfe is waiting," he said. "Tell him his errand boy survived," I said, stepping inside. The smell of veal had reached cathedral level, Wolfe's idea of divine inspiration. He was at his desk when I entered, eyes closed, fingers tented. When he opened them, they didn't blink. "You have the type sample." I handed over the sheet. "Typed on Dunn's Remington, fresh ribbon and all. He confessed to taking Ryman's file, but swore he didn't kill him. Then your friend Sergeant Pollard dropped in, right on cue." Wolfe's mouth turned upward a millimeter. "Competence is refreshing. Sit, Archie. You will recount precisely." I did. The confession, the shot through the calendar, the sudden rescue. Wolfe listened, motionless except for the slow drift of his thumb across his lower lip. When I finished, he picked up the page and held it under the lamp. "The impression is perfect," he murmured. "The same flaws in E and R. Therefore, the same machine produced both threats." "Which means Dunn wrote the notes," I said. "Or someone who used his office freely," Wolfe replied. "Do not simplify before I command it." He studied the page another moment, then set it down. "Mr. Dunn's guilt is limited to cowardice. He is a thief of evidence, not of life." "He aimed a gun at me," I reminded him. "That proves fear, not murder. He anticipated exposure. He did not anticipate you being armed with wit." "That's touching," I said, "but we're still missing a killer and a file." "Both," Wolfe said, "will soon present themselves." He rang the buzzer for Fritz. "Bring beer and the telephone index," he instructed. When the tray arrived, he filled his glass with the patience of a monk drawing confession. "Archie, call Mrs. Vale. Request her presence within the hour." I arched a brow. You think she'll just pop over and talk about her dead husband's insurance? She will if you inform her that the alternative is a visit from Inspector Kramer, Wolfe said. Choose whichever tone you prefer. I made the call. The maid who answered sounded like she could gut a salesman with one syllable, but when I mentioned Wolfe's name and urgent legal matter, her frost melted enough to schedule an immediate appearance. Mrs. Vale will arrive in 30 minutes, she said, and hung up before gratitude could escape. Wolfe nodded. Good. Prepare the room. I expect precision, not charm. I straightened the chairs and made room for drama. Wolfe adjusted the blinds to cut the glare, creating that subdued light he favors for truth extraction. I was pouring his second beer when the door buzzer hummed. Mrs. Vale, I said, and went to fetch our guest. She didn't need introduction. Tall, composed, the kind of beauty that didn't bother with apologies. Her hat was black, her gloves pearl grey, and the perfume that followed her in had the arrogance of imported money. Mr. Wolfe, she said, voice crisp but pleasant. Your message was abrupt. I hope the matter justifies the urgency. It does, Wolfe said, gesturing toward the red chair. Please sit. She did, crossing one leg over the other with unhurried precision. I took my usual position near the bookshelves, notebook ready, though I rarely needed to write when Wolfe went to work. You were acquainted with Mr. Charles Ryman, Wolfe began. Only professionally, she said. He handled my husband's policy. Did you meet him privately? She frowned. Once, to sign forms. Why? Because he is dead, Wolfe said, and because his death was not self-inflicted. Her face didn't flicker. That takes skill or practice. I read the report, she said evenly. A suicide, wasn't it? It was murder, Wolfe said. Committed by someone who feared the exposure of fraud involving your claim. She gave a light laugh. That's absurd. My husband's death was verified by the Coast Guard. Yes, Wolfe said, and yet the witness statement Ryman mentioned. Missing. Conveniently so. I can't imagine how that concerns me, she said, though her gloved hand tightened around her purse. Wolfe's voice softened to a velvet thread. Mrs. Vale, the file he called the offset, was removed from his office by Mr. Dunn after the murder. He claims it contained proof of irregularity. Where is that file now? I have no idea, she said quickly. Then allow me to offer one, Wolfe replied. It is in your possession. She drew back slightly. That's preposterous. Indeed, Wolfe said. Preposterous, yet inevitable. The man who threatened Miss Corday used Mr. Dunn's typewriter, implying access to his office. You visited the agency twice, did you not? Once before the payout, once after your husband's funeral. Her eyes narrowed. What are you implying? That during one of those visits you observed enough to know which drawer held the file. You, or someone acting on your behalf, returned to remove it after Ryman's death. The threats to Miss Corday were intended to ensure her silence about what she witnessed. She rose abruptly. Mr. Wolfe, I won't listen to this. You already are, Wolfe said, unmoving, and you will remain until you decide which version of the truth suits you best, the one you tell me or the one Inspector Kramer extracts. I'd seen that tone freeze bigger fish than her. She stood for a long moment, breathing shallow, then sat again. You think I killed him? No, Wolfe said. You lack the proximity and perhaps the courage, but you know who did. Your husband's partner, Mr. Ridley, is in Chicago, is he not? Her eyes flicked down. Yes. He returned last night on the midnight train, Wolfe said. He telephoned Dunn at 8 this morning, unaware the police had taken him. That call was traced to your apartment. Her lips parted, but no sound emerged. I took a step forward. So Ridley's been paying visits you forgot to mention. She exhaled slowly. He came to thank me for my discretion. That, Wolfe said, is not a word often used for hush money. Her chin lifted. You have no proof? I will, Wolfe said calmly. When Mr. Ridley arrives here within the hour. Her color drained. You can't. He won't come. He already is, Wolfe said. Archie telephoned him before you arrived. She turned on me, eyes flashing. You. Routine courtesy, I said. We like to have everyone on stage for the finale. She slumped back in the chair, one hand gripping her purse as though it might explode. Wolfe folded his hands. You may still protect yourself, madam. When he enters, you will listen, and if conscience stirs, you will speak. I assure you, the law is more merciful than silence. The buzzer sounded again. I went to the hall, and there he was. Cale Ridley, grey suit, neat mustache, eyes like polished tin. He walked in with the composure of a man who'd learned to hide panic behind manners. Mr. Wolfe, he said, you wanted to see me? Indeed, Wolfe said. Join Mrs. Vale. The conversation concerns you both. He glanced at her, then at me, sensing the temperature and not liking it. I closed the door behind him and took my position. Wolfe's tone turned almost casual. Mr. Ridley, Mr. Ryman, discovered fraud within your agency, false disbursements under the Vale claim. You profited. When he threatened to expose you, you killed him. Then you compelled Mrs. Vale's silence by returning the money and her complicity in exchange for protection. Ridley laughed, short and sharp. That's ridiculous. Yes, Wolfe said. So ridiculous that you left fingerprints on the Remington noiseless in Mr. Dunn's office when you typed the threats. I imagine Inspector Kramer will find them enlightening. Ridley's composure cracked. He turned to Mrs. Vale, face pale. You told them. She shook her head helplessly. I didn't, I swear. He moved suddenly, reaching inside his coat, and I didn't wait to find out for what. My hand shot forward, catching his wrist. The small revolver he'd been hiding clattered to the carpet. I twisted his arm behind him while Wolfe rang the buzzer. Fritz, he said, perfectly calm. Inform Inspector Kramer we have completed his work for him. Ridley was breathing hard, eyes full of the ruin that comes when the last lie collapses. Wolfe leaned forward, eyes heavy with thought. You might have prospered honestly, Mr. Ridley. Instead, you chose expedience. The economy of crime is always false. He turned to me. Archie, see that the good inspector enters without drama. This house has endured enough excitement for one morning. Fritz appeared in the doorway exactly 10 seconds after Wolfe hit the buzzer, which is as close as that man ever comes to haste. He took in the tableau, Ridley pinned against the chair, Mrs. Vale wilted like a corsage at a wake, and didn't blink. Inspector Kramer is in the front hall, he said. Admit him, Wolfe replied. I kept Ridley where he was until Kramer stomped in, cigar already blazing. All right, Wolfe. What circus have you built this time? The usual, Wolfe said mildly. A corpse avenged, a culprit confined, and an inspector confounded. Kramer scowled. Meaning? Meaning, I said. Your suspect list just shrank by one living, breathing scoundrel. I gave Ridley's wrist a last twist for punctuation and pushed him into the red chair. Meet Cale Ridley, insurance executive, gun collector, and fresh candidate for the electric chair. Kramer's eyes narrowed on the revolver glinting near the rug. He tried to use that? He considered it, I said. Then gravity voted no. Ridley glared up at me, breathing fast. You can't prove anything. This whole show is a bluff. Wolfe folded his hands. Archie, oblige Mr. Ridley with a brief recital. I didn't need prompting. Ryman found the fake entries in the Vale claim. You confronted him. He wouldn't play ball. You shot him, wiped the gun, left it to stage a suicide. You later sent those charming typewritten notes to the only witness, Miss Corday, using Dunn's Remington in the agency office. Trouble is, Wolfe matched the defects in the keys. That ribbon's got your fingerprints all over it, and your lady friend here confirms you borrowed her apartment last night for a private chat, which was really your hideout between trains. Kramer took a slow pull on his cigar. You admit any of that, Ridley? Ridley's laugh was brittle. You're insane. There's no proof I even own that gun. Oh, there will be, Wolfe said. The bullet embedded in Mr. Ryman's office wall, left by your first shot, will match the weapon you carried into my house. Inspector, I suggest you retrieve both. Kramer puffed smoke, the corners of his mouth curling. You already checked the wall, didn't you? Wolfe's eyes glimmered. I have never sullied my shoes at a crime scene. Mr. Goodwin's report sufficed. He noted a patched mark above the calendar in Mr. Dunn's office. Fresh plaster, inconsistent color. I imagine laboratory analysis will reward you. Kramer grunted. You never quit showing off, do you? It's my vice, Wolfe said. Yours is disbelief. Both are incurable. Mrs. Vale stirred, her voice thin but steady. Inspector, he forced me. He said if I didn't keep quiet, he'd claim I helped falsify the policy. Ridley turned on her, voice breaking. You cowardly— Enough, Wolfe snapped, and the room obeyed. Mrs. Vale, you may be charged with accessory, but your cooperation will mitigate the penalty. Mr. Ridley's fate is less negotiable. Kramer moved to the phone and barked an order to headquarters for 2 men and a wagon. While he talked, Wolfe leaned back, watching Ridley with something close to disappointment. Your flaw, sir, he said, was arithmetic. You believed you could balance greed with intellect, but the sums never align. Ridley spat the words. You pompous parasite. Wolfe didn't flinch. A parasite feeds without killing the host. You might have tried the same approach. I gathered the revolver into a handkerchief and set it on the desk. Wolfe nodded approval, then addressed Kramer. You will also find, in Mr. Dunn's testimony, the missing file marked offset. It details falsified accounts signed under Ridley's authority. The proof, you see, was in his own bookkeeping. Kramer closed the phone with a click and shoved it away. You're telling me this whole mess, Ryman's death, the threats, the fraud, all because this guy couldn't keep his ledgers honest? Because he mistook deceit for cleverness, Wolfe corrected. And cleverness without control invites chaos. The doorbell chimed again. Pollard this time, punctual as tax season, flanked by 2 uniforms. He took one look at the scene and let out a low whistle. Guess I missed the fireworks. You may take him, Wolfe said. The officers moved in, clamping Ridley's wrists. He didn't resist. He just stared at Wolfe with the kind of hatred that burns itself out before it reaches flame. As they led him out, he muttered, You think this makes you noble? You're just another man who sells certainty. Wolfe sighed. I sell accuracy. Nobility is complimentary. When the door closed behind them, Mrs. Vale sat rigid, eyes glassy. I poured her a glass of water, which she ignored. You should make a statement, I said gently. Kramer's mood improves when people talk before he asks. She nodded faintly. I will. Tell Miss Corday I'm sorry. She'll appreciate it, I said, though we both knew apologies don't resurrect the dead. Fritz reappeared, announced that lunch was ready, and departed again with the solemnity of a man escorting royalty. Wolfe inhaled deeply. Vive la mode, he murmured, redolent of victory. Kramer shot him a look. You planning to eat while I write my report? Of course, Wolfe said. I trust you can manage prose without my supervision. Kramer snorted, pocketed his notebook, and lumbered out. When the house was quiet again, I loosened my tie and leaned on the desk. You're getting soft, I said. You didn't even gloat properly. He opened his eyes, faint amusement flickering. I have no need to gloat. The satisfaction lies in completion. The symmetry, Archie. The elegance of a problem resolved. Symmetry's fine, I said, but remind me next time to carry a bigger gun when you send me to collect it. Your reflexes sufficed, he said dryly. You may dine with Fritz tonight. I will require solitude for digestion. That was his version of thanks. I took it. As I headed for the stairs, the last traces of perfume still clung to the air, mixed with the sharper smell of cigar smoke and spent gunpowder, a blend that somehow fit the brownstone perfectly. I paused at the door and looked back at Wolfe, already reaching for his glass of beer, serene as a man who'd just rearranged the universe to his liking. Outside, a siren wailed distantly, growing fainter as it carried Ridley and the wreckage of his cleverness away. Inside, the house settled into its usual calm, the sound of a man eating, the faint hum of order restored, and me thinking, not for the first time, that in this city full of killers, Nero Wolfe's brownstone was the safest and most dangerous address in town. The click of the front door lock hadn't fully faded when Wolfe's fork scraped the edge of his plate. One clean sound that, in his language, meant the case was closed and the outside world was dismissed. I let him have 3 bites before I broke the rule about silence at meals. "You know, I'm not complaining," I said, "but that one wrapped up too neatly. It's got the symmetry you love, only maybe a little too much." He didn't look up. "Symmetry is the natural consequence of truth." "Sure," I said, "unless somebody's hiding behind it." That made him pause, which was worth the interruption. He dabbed his mouth and leaned back. "You suspect incompletion?" "I suspect convenience," I said. "Ridley folds too fast. Mrs. Vale cooperates before Kramer even asks, and the file that was supposed to prove everything, nobody's seen it. Dunn said he took it, but he also said he lost it. That's a big piece to leave floating." He regarded me through half-lidded eyes. "You were always a poor celebrant." "Comes from working with you," I said. "You taught me not to trust easy endings." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Continue your lament. I will listen until the veal grows cold." I set my cup down and folded my arms. If Ridley wanted Ryman silenced, he'd have taken the file as well as the risk, but we found neither in his office, his apartment, nor his train compartment. He admitted the fraud, sure, but he never said where the evidence went, which means someone else has it, and someone who's still breathing easy. That earned me a slow nod. "Your inference is sound. The absence of the file troubles me also." He poured himself another half-inch of beer. "We shall remedy that." "Meaning?" "Meaning," he said, "that Miss Corday will bring it to us." I blinked. "You think she's got it?" "I think she had it," he said. Her testimony about Ryman's drawer was too specific for a casual glance. She claimed she saw the folder, described its color and label precisely, and yet could not describe the man who killed him. An odd imbalance. Memory seldom discriminates so selectively without motive. I frowned. "So you think she took it?" "Not with intent to conceal guilt. Likely she feared the police would lose it, or destroy it to protect the agency's reputation. A woman acting under panic and conscience would hide it where she felt safest." "Which means?" He gave a satisfied little hum. "Where else but her apartment?" I stood. "You just had her moved to a hotel." "Precisely why the apartment is now accessible." He pushed his chair back an inch, which in Wolfe's universe was a leap across oceans. "You will accompany Mr. Panzer. Retrieve the folder if it exists. If it does not, observe what has replaced it. You think our fedora friend will be back?" "I think he never left." That was motivation enough. I grabbed my coat, rang Saul, and 10 minutes later his familiar low voice answered, "You want company or a witness?" "Both," I said. "Bring the quiet shoes. Wolfe's got a hunch Miss Corday planted something in her place, and he wants it before the wrong people find it." "I'll meet you there," he said, and hung up. The night had the sharp chill that keeps Manhattan honest. When I reached her building, Saul's shadow was already by the stoop, solid and casual as part of the brickwork. "No movement," he said softly. "But somebody's been inside. Window latch scraped." "Which floor?" "Third, front left." That was hers. I drew a slow breath. Let's pay a visit. We moved up the stairwell without talking. Saul took the lead, every step placed like a heartbeat. The corridor smelled faintly of varnish and nerves. Her door showed fresh marks around the lock, polished metal where old scratches had been. Saul touched it lightly, then nodded. Picked, within the hour. I turned the knob. It yielded easily. The room inside was dark except for the faint wash of streetlight through the curtains. Nothing looked overturned, but the air carried that peculiar hush that comes after someone leaves in a hurry. Saul flicked his small pen light once across the floor. No dust disturbed except near the bookshelf. We moved closer. Between 2 volumes of modern office procedure and the collected Omar Khayyam was a thin gap. Saul reached in and drew out a blue folder, Ridley Agency logo intact. My heart gave a satisfied thump. "The offset file," I said. Saul started to open it, but I caught the faintest scuff of leather on linoleum behind us. He froze. A shadow cut across the light at the doorway, broad-shouldered, hat-brim low. "Drop it," a voice ordered. Calm, deliberate, no accent. Saul eased the folder down. I turned just enough to see him clearly. The gray fedora man. Same one from the street. But this time, the gun wasn't for display. "I'll take that," he said. "Guessing you're not here for overdue rent," I said. He didn't smile. "Back away." Saul's voice was level. "You work for Ridley?" "Worked," the man said. "He's finished. I'm closing accounts." "By killing witnesses?" I asked. "That was the contract. Now I just want what's owed." He stepped forward, keeping the muzzle steady. Saul's hand brushed his coat. Subtle but clear to me. "Count to 3. I nodded. The man reached down for the folder, gun still trained, and on the half-second between bend and balance, Saul moved. His elbow came up in a blur, catching the man's wrist, and the gun clattered across the floor. I kicked it under the radiator while Saul drove the guy back into the wall. They struggled, short, brutal, and then the man sagged, winded but alive. I grabbed the folder, checked it, intact. "You always pick the polite ones," I told Saul. He was breathing evenly again. "Alive witnesses are more talkative." The man glared up. "You think this ends with me? You don't know who—" "Spare us," I cut in. "You're talking to Nero Wolfe's errand crew. We specialize in endings." We marched him down the stairs, no audience but the wallpaper. Outside, I flagged a cab. Saul kept him steady while I called Wolfe. He answered before the first ring finished. "Report." "Your intuition wins again," I said. "Found the folder in her apartment and the fedora that came with it. He says Ridley hired him, but he's hinting bigger fish." "Bring both," Wolfe said. "And Archie, handle delicately. I dislike blood on paper." We rode back, with the grey man wedged between us, glaring holes in the window. Saul had one hand in his pocket where his piece rested. I had the folder pressed flat under my arm. The city looked almost peaceful in reverse motion. When we reached the brownstone, Fritz admitted us with his usual economy of expression. Wolfe was waiting, beer untouched, eyes sharp as fresh-cut amber. "Place him there," he said, pointing to the chair. The man didn't bother to resist. He just stared at Wolfe, then at the room, the books, the orchids, the order. "You're the one they talk about," he said finally. "So I'm told," Wolfe replied. "You're a contract killer, yes? Engaged by Mr. Ridley?" "Not by him," the man said quietly. "By the one who owned him." That pulled Wolfe's brow up an inch. "Clarify." The man's eyes moved to me. "You really want the rest? The agency's not just insurance. It launders money, accounts. Ridley was small change. The real buyer wanted quiet." Wolfe's voice dropped. "And who was the buyer?" "Check the second page of that file," he said. "You'll see the name. Then maybe you'll understand why you shouldn't have called the police yet." I opened the folder. Under the first sheet, Ryman's report, was another document, stapled and faintly smudged. The heading read, Caldwell Industries, private investment ledger. Wolfe took it, eyes narrowing. Indeed, he said softly. Archie, secure this. Mr. Kramer will wait until I have finished verifying its implications. The killer smirked faintly. Good luck. You've just stepped into a bigger game than murder. Perhaps, Wolfe said, but every game ends, and I have never lost one. Wolfe didn't move, but his attention filled the room like a tide rising around the rest of us. The killer sat in the red chair, wrists loose on the armrests, eyes flat and watchful. Saul stood by the door, quiet, alert, and ready to turn motion into regret if the man twitched. I stayed by the desk, folder in hand, waiting for Wolfe to process the name on that second page. When he spoke, his voice had the weight of a verdict. Caldwell Industries, he said slowly, is a shell within a shell. Registered in Delaware, owned by one of the Ridley Agency's parent investors, a Mr. Leonard Brigham. Sir, he holds positions on 3 banking boards and 1 Senate subcommittee. Curious bedfellows for fraud and homicide. The man in the chair smirked faintly. Now you're getting it. Brigham signs the checks, Ridley did the laundering, and I kept the leaks quiet. By quiet, you mean dead, I said. He looked at me without heat. It's cleaner that way. Saul's mouth tightened, the only sign he'd heard it. Wolfe regarded the man with a look that belonged in an anatomy textbook under dissection. Your candor is impressive, he said. Suicidal, perhaps, but impressive. Not suicidal, the man replied. Just realistic. You think arresting Ridley stopped this? Brigham's got half the city in his pocket. By tomorrow morning, Ridley's confession will vanish from the record, and so will I. That depends, I said. Right now, you're still breathing in Wolfe's house, which means your odds are marginally better than average. He gave a thin smile. You can't hold me. You call the police, they'll hand me over before you hang up. Incorrect, Wolfe said. I will not call the police until my conditions are met. The man blinked. What conditions? That you will write a complete statement of your activities under Mr. Brigham's employ, including every instance of coercion, murder, or blackmail ordered or implied. You're joking. I never joke about confession, Wolfe said. It saves time. The man looked at Saul, then at me, and read the room correctly. He wasn't getting out until Wolfe said so. With a resigned motion, he leaned forward. Fine. Paper? I slid a notepad across the desk. He took it, uncapped my pen, and started writing. Short strokes, deliberate. Wolfe watched him the way a jeweler watches a counterfeit gem under magnification. I said quietly, If Brigham's behind this, you're making a lot of enemies fast. I already had them, Wolfe murmured, but this one's worth keeping. 5 minutes passed in silence except for the scratch of pen and the faint, rhythmic tick from the wall clock. When the man finally dropped the pen, his face was pale but calm. That's it. Everything from Ryman's discovery to Ridley's call. Even the threats to the girl. You'll see the payments, the bank trail, all signed by Brigham's proxy account. Wolfe gestured. Archie. I took the notepad, skimmed it, then met his eyes. Checks out with what we found in the file. Good, Wolfe said. Mr. Panzer, please deliver our guest to Inspector Kramer, along with a note stating that this man has confessed to multiple murders under orders from Leonard Brigham. Instruct Kramer to hold him under federal protective custody, quietly. Saul nodded, taking the man by the arm. You going to make it that easy for me? The man gave a shrug that wasn't quite defeat. You've already won. They left, the front door closing softly behind them. Wolfe exhaled through his nose, a sound like the first sigh after a storm. Brigham will respond swiftly. Prepare yourself, Archie. We will have visitors before the hour ends. He wasn't wrong. 20 minutes hadn't passed when the buzzer went. 2 short rings, impatient. I checked the camera feed, saw the trim outline of a man in an overcoat, flanked by 2 others. He brought friends, I said. Let him in, Wolfe said. You will remain standing. I pressed the release. Leonard Brigham entered like a man accustomed to doors that open first. Mid-50s, silver hair, heavy jaw, the kind of face built for Senate portraits and quiet threats. The two men behind him had shoulders for rent and eyes that did arithmetic. Mr. Wolfe, Brigham said, smooth as silk over wire. I understand you're holding sensitive material belonging to my company. You misunderstand, Wolfe replied. I'm preserving evidence belonging to the state. Brigham's smile thinned. Let's be plain. That file is stolen property. Its contents are classified corporate records, and your possession of them constitutes theft. Wolfe gestured lazily toward the desk. Your corporation, Mr. Brigham, is a fiction. The records detail embezzlement, insurance fraud, and the orchestration of at least 2 homicides. You will forgive me for valuing truth above decorum. Brigham's eyes hardened. You've made an enemy you can't afford. That phrase, Wolfe said, is the anthem of fools. My enemies are self-limiting. They exhaust themselves through bluster. One of the bodyguards shifted. I stepped forward half a foot, hand hovering near my jacket pocket. Wolfe didn't glance at me, but his tone acquired that iron lilt that could flatten an avalanche. Mr. Brigham, if you attempt coercion, your predicament will worsen. A copy of that file is already in the possession of Inspector Kramer, along with a confession from your agent. In precisely 30 minutes, the district attorney will receive another. Brigham froze for half a second, recalculating. You're bluffing. Wolfe leaned back, steepled fingers against his chest. You may test the proposition, though I warn you, I'm not fond of suspense. Brigham's mask cracked just slightly. What do you want? Nothing, Wolfe said. You will confess, resign, and disappear from public life. In return, your arrest will be civil, not spectacular. Brigham stared at him, then gave a low, humorless laugh. You think you can dictate terms to me? I already have, Wolfe said, and pressed the buzzer again. The front door opened behind Brigham, and Kramer walked in, trench coat unbuttoned, cigar burning like a fuse. Evening, Brigham, Kramer said. We've been looking for you. The color drained from Brigham's face as the 2 guards stepped instinctively forward and froze when Kramer's men filled the doorway behind him. Wolfe didn't move, didn't gloat. He simply lifted his glass of beer. I took the liberty of calling our inspector, he said. Your punctuality spares me further boredom. Kramer nodded to his men. Take him. Brigham started to protest, but Kramer cut him off. You can save it for the DA. We've got your payroll ledger, your hitman's confession, and a nice bundle of typewritten valentines to the lady you scared half to death. Congratulations, you've insured yourself for 20 years to life. They hustled Brigham and his men out. Wolfe watched the procession like a man watching chess pieces reach their checkmate. When the door closed again, he lifted the folder gently, set it on the corner of his desk, and murmured, At last, completion. You realize, I said, that half the city's going to know by morning that you just flattened a senator's financier. Publicity is Kramer's problem, Wolfe said. Truth is mine. Sure, I said, but truth usually bites back. He looked at me then, the faintest glint of humor beneath the gravity. That is why we keep our teeth sharp. I leaned against the desk, grinning. So what now? Champagne or more veal? Neither, he said, closing his eyes. We have not yet heard from Miss Corday. I suspect gratitude will arrive before dessert. And as if cued by an unseen conductor, the phone rang. Clear, insistent, alive. I reached for it. Nero Wolfe's office, I said. A woman's voice, trembling but relieved, filled the line. Mr. Goodwin, it's over, isn't it? I looked at Wolfe, who had opened his eyes, listening. Yeah, I said softly. It's over. Then please, she said, thank him for me. I hung up, turned and found Wolfe already lifting his glass again. "You can tell her yourself," I said. He shook his head. "No. Let gratitude rest where it belongs, with the living." Wolfe didn't answer me right away. He just sat there with the phone's hum still lingering in the air, the way some men savor a fine wine. The light from the desk lamp caught the rim of his glass and painted his fingers in gold. He lifted it, took one deliberate sip, and said, "That, Archie, concludes the case of Miss Corday." "You're calling it a case now?" I asked. "She calls it a rescue. Kramer calls it interference, and I call it 2 sleepless nights and 1 hole in a calendar. You get to sit in your chair, quote Aristotle, and collect applause." He ignored the sarcasm, which was a specialty of his. "I do not collect applause. I collect order. Disorder irritates me. Miss Corday's fear, Ridley's greed, Brigham's arrogance. They were an orchestra without a conductor. I merely restored the rhythm." "Nice metaphor," I said. "Too bad it still sounds like you're taking bows." He allowed himself the faintest smile. "Perhaps." He leaned back, eyes half closed. "You're thinking that we stumbled into something larger than our commission. You're right. The exposure of Caldwell Industries will lead to a congressional inquiry, and a dozen men will scramble to erase their footprints. We have given the first push." "That push," I said, "is going to make enemies with deeper pockets than our client's handbag. You sure you're in the mood for attention?" "I am in the mood for digestion," he said. "Attention, like indigestion, is temporary." I was about to answer when Fritz appeared, perfectly timed as always, holding a small silver tray with an envelope resting on it. "This arrived by hand," he said. "No return address." Wolfe frowned. "At this hour?" "Yes, sir. A messenger left it and departed before I reached the door." Wolfe motioned to me. "Archie." I took the envelope, held it to the light. No watermark, heavy stock. Whoever sent it wasn't short on taste. The flap wasn't sealed. Inside was a single folded sheet of cream paper with one typed line. The truth rarely ends with one confession. No signature. Same even spacing, clean letters. I felt a pinch in my stomach. "Remington Noiseless," I said. "Same typeface as our earlier friend's work." Wolfe's brows rose just slightly. "Curious. Our correspondent is either sentimental or unwise." "Or alive," I said. "You think Brigham had a partner?" "Undoubtedly. Enterprises of corruption are like hydras, Archie. Remove one head, 2 appear." "So the party's not over," I said. "It seldom is," Wolfe murmured. He took the paper, examined the edges, then handed it back. "No fingerprints, naturally. Whoever delivered it wishes to remind us of our vulnerability." "Then it worked," I said. "You planning to call Kramer again?" He shook his head. "No. I have no intention of providing him amusement. The message serves only to confirm what I already knew, that we touched a network, not a node. The immediate threat, however, is extinguished." I dropped into the chair opposite him. "You're awfully calm for a man who just got a calling card from a ghost." He looked at me over the rim of his glass. "Would you prefer I panic?" I'd settle for caution. "Caution has already been exercised," he said. "Saul remains in contact with Kramer's men at headquarters. Miss Corday is under protection. The others, Dunn, Mrs. Vale, will testify under compulsion. What remains is bureaucracy. It will grind slowly, but it will grind." I tilted my head toward the paper. "And our mystery author?" He folded his hands. "He or she will reveal themselves through consequence. Words are useless unless they intend effect." "That sounds like a dare," I said. "It is," he replied. The phone rang again, sharp against the quiet. I picked it up. "Nero Wolfe's office." A man's voice, low and strained, came through. "Tell Wolfe he should have left well enough alone." The line went dead before I could reply. I stared at the receiver, then set it down slowly. You heard that, I said. I did, Wolfe answered. A threat without wit. I dislike them most. He reached into the drawer and withdrew a small notebook bound in dark leather. It was one of his private ledgers, the kind even I wasn't supposed to peek at. He made a single notation, closed it, and said, "We will keep watch tonight." I nodded. "Saul and I can take shifts." "That won't be necessary. Fritz will secure the windows and door bolts. You will remain awake until dawn, but you may do so in comfort. Whoever threatens prefers intimidation to action." "You're betting on psychology again," I said. "It pays better than roulette," he murmured. The house settled into its nocturnal rhythm. Fritz moving softly through the halls, the faint hiss of the radiator, the city's heartbeat muted beyond the curtains. I sat at my desk with a cup of coffee and the automatic tucked near my elbow, pretending to read the newspaper but mostly watching Wolfe. He stayed in his chair, eyes closed, but not sleeping. Just thinking, building those invisible connections that turned random fear into pattern. Around 3 the silence broke. A light knock sounded from the vestibule. 2 short taps, measured, confident. I stood instantly, weapon drawn, and glanced at Wolfe. His eyes opened, calm as ever. "Answer it," he said. I crossed to the door, every nerve tuned, and unlatched the inner bolt. A folded sheet slid under the door and fluttered against my shoe. I didn't open it, just stared at it until Wolfe said, "Bring it here." I carried it to him. The paper was identical to the last, but this one bore only a single word. "Next." Wolfe studied it without touching. "So," he said softly, "they announce succession." "That's one way to say it," I said. "You want to tell me what it means before I call Kramer for real." He looked up, and for once there was no irony in his eyes. "It means, Archie, that the man I expected has chosen to play his hand sooner than I hoped." Expected. Leonard Brigham was not the mind behind this enterprise, Wolfe said. He was merely its banker. The architect remains unnamed, but this, he tapped the paper with a single finger, is his signature. "You know who it is?" "I know what he is," Wolfe said, "and I know he is not finished." I holstered the automatic and leaned against the desk. "Then I suppose we're not either." He gave me a slow nod. "No, but tonight we rest. Tomorrow we begin again." The lamp cast his face in half-shadow, the kind that makes you wonder whether victory or something darker had just walked through the door. I watched him lift his beer, serene as always, and thought about the word on that page. Just 4 letters, but enough to stretch the night wide open. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the glass and carried the faint echo of tires on wet pavement. Somewhere, another player had joined the board, and Wolfe, damn him, was already planning the next move. Fritz didn't need to be told twice. The minute Kramer's car pulled away, the click of the front door lock was followed by the faint sound of kitchen order re-establishing itself. Pots shifting, the hiss of gas under control again. Wolfe sat exactly as before, a fortress in a chair, eyes closed but far from rest. "You're thinking," I said. "I'm finishing," he corrected. "Thinking implies uncertainty." I dropped into my chair, stretching the ache out of my shoulder. "You could have fooled me. The way she looked at you when she left, I thought she was going to thank you for catching her." "She was," he said. "But gratitude is useless unless it reforms the giver. Miss Morley is beyond reform." "She was smart," I said. "Colder than a November draft, but smart." "Intelligence divorced from conscience," he murmured, "is simply geometry, perfect but lifeless." That was Wolfe's version of mourning. I let it sit there while Fritz appeared with the evening tray. Beer for Wolfe, coffee for me, and the kind of sandwich that says civilization still exists somewhere east of 6th Avenue. "You'll be relieved to know, Archie," Wolfe said, "that the police have retrieved the final document from Miss Morley's apartment. She kept a duplicate of every falsified ledger." "Neat habit," I said. "For a perfectionist, she sure made it easy for Kramer to wrap things up." "Not easy," Wolfe said. "Expedient. She wanted the evidence found. It ensures her narrative survives. She understood that immortality lies not in acquittal, but in record." I whistled. "That's a chilly way to live." He sipped his beer. "And to die, yet it preserves symmetry." The phone rang again. Fritz caught it and handed the receiver to me. Miss Corday's voice came through, tired but lighter. "Mr. Goodwin, Inspector Kramer said it's really over." "It is," I told her. "You can breathe again." "I wanted to thank Mr. Wolfe," she said. "You just did," I said, and hung up before Wolfe could pretend indifference. He raised one brow. "Efficient." She sounded human again. That's efficiency enough. He inclined his head, which in his language was the equivalent of applause. Outside, a cab hissed past through wet pavement. The city had that post-storm quiet that makes even Midtown sound like it's waiting for absolution. I leaned back. "You know, for a case that started with a woman in my waiting room, it sure ended with a woman leaving in cuffs." "That," Wolfe said, "is balance. You keep saying that word. You ever wonder what happens when the scales tilt our way too often?" He opened his eyes fully, and for once they had warmth. "Then we rest them, Archie. Even justice tires." Fritz cleared the tray and vanished again. Wolfe pushed his glass aside and spoke as if to himself. "She killed not for gain, but to preserve the illusion that she was indispensable. Ridley, Brigham, Ryman, they were symptoms. She was the disease. Society breeds such infections whenever vanity is mistaken for competence." "Sounds like half the boardrooms in Manhattan," he almost smiled. "And most of Washington." We let the silence return. The orchids in their ranks breathed their faint perfume across the room, indifferent to sin or salvation. Wolfe reached into the drawer, withdrew his leather ledger, and wrote one final line in it. 3 words, neat and black. I didn't ask. He closed the book softly. "That's it," I said. "No speech, no philosophy for the ages?" "You mistake restraint for omission," he said. "If the case taught you nothing else, learn this. Words should stop when truth is complete." I grinned. "Then consider this truth. Fritz said there's apple strudel left from lunch." Wolfe's eyes brightened the way normal men's do at a symphony. "Bring it, and 2 portions. Your impertinence deserves compensation." That's Wolfe. Gratitude by pastry. I brought the plates, and for a few minutes the brownstone held only the sound of forks and rain easing off the windows. He spoke again, low and deliberate. "Archie, I am not immortal, but intellect, properly applied, may approach permanence. These cases, each is a stone in the edifice." "Sure," I said, "and I'm the mortar." "You are," he said, "the movement that keeps the structure alive. A building must breathe, or it collapses." That was as close to affection as he'll ever get, so I didn't ruin it by talking. I just let the sound of him cutting through pastry mark the rhythm of peace restored. When I looked out the window, the sky was turning the pale color that means dawn is testing the locks. Somewhere in the city, Kramer was already dictating his report. Miss Corday was packing for a train out of town, and Miss Morley was trading precision for prison bars. Order restored, as Wolfe would say. I turned back toward him. He was wiping his mouth with the care of a man finishing not a meal, but a chapter. "That all, boss?" "For tonight," he said. "Tomorrow. Perhaps another knock, another anomaly. The world persists in its errors." He lifted his glass one final time. The beer caught the early light and glowed like liquid brass. "To correction," he said. I raised my cup. "To symmetry." He drank. I followed. The city sighed against the windows, alive again, waiting for its next mistake.